We got testing audio. Let me know if you can. I'm going to mute myself on here. Check 1 2 1 2. Check check check. Can you hear? Perfect. Okay. Alright, we're starting at 10:15. It's starting 10:15, so. I've got the TV driving, it's got the badge on there, but it's not going to work. Yeah, I'm going to ask them for a discount. Yeah, I've got memory cards and everything, yeah. Should I give you a call back when they're ready? No, I couldn't. The big cameraman, but they're shots with us. Yeah. I wish I could. Do you got big cameras? Alright, cool, I'll give you a call back. Well, we both did ask, but they said not right now. But after that. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I'm right. No worries. Cool. Alright, I'm telling you.
If it doesn't, then
they just will. That's true, exactly. And that's inevitably going to happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending our press conference today, particularly on such an important news day with the cabinet reshuffle and the sacking of Suella Braverman, which is interesting after her mischaracterization of very important peace marches calling for a ceasefire over the weekend. Her categorization of that as hate marchers was disgraceful, and I think it was the only appropriate thing for the government to sack her this morning. In any event, I'm Taher Ali, founder and director of the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians, the ICJP. I'm also a lawyer with a practice in criminal and international law at a leading London law firm. Now, this press conference today is about the loss British Palestinians have experienced in Gaza. The families you will hear from will be speaking about the pain and their loss since Israel attacked following the events of October the 7th. But if we are going to learn anything at all from the tragic experience of the families that are here to tell you their stories, it's important to place the events of October the 7th and since then into their context. Many Palestinians do not see what happened in Gaza as retaliation by Israel in respect of the events of October the 7th. They see this as a continuation of the Nakba that started in 1948, the stealing of Palestinian land and the subjugation of the Palestinian people for 75 years. The heinous and atrocious events of October the 7th did not happen in a vacuum. In the exact same way that you do not excuse what happened on the 7th of October because of what went before it, you cannot excuse what Israel has done since October the 7th because of it. What is happening in Gaza has gone well past any civilized notion or legal notion of self-defense. Palestinians have suffered from 75 years of dispossession, 56 years of occupation, and 17 years of blockade. The daily reality of Palestinians before October the 7th was something that should not have remained the subject of willful international political failure for decades. The current cycle of violence is the direct responsibility of the states that have gifted Israel impunity and prevented accountability from allegation after allegation of violation of international law by Israel for decades. The experience of Palestinians in Gaza since October the 7th is reminiscent of the atrocities that fell on the Palestinian people during the Nakba in 1948 and continued since then. Even Israel's Operation Cast Lead in 2009, which led to 1,400 Palestinians, including 300 children, led to the death of 1,400 Palestinians and 300 children, paled when compared with what we are seeing happen right now in Gaza. And in that conflict, in Cast Lead, a British court issued an arrest warrant for a member of Israel's war cabinet, Tzipi Livni, for her participation in alleged war crimes in relation to Gaza. 1,200, the revised figure by Israel, 1,200 Israelis lost their lives on October the 7th. Since then, over 11,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. The US Assistant Secretary of State Barbara Leaf stated that she expects the number to be higher. Over 4,000 of these dead are Palestinian children. Over 1.5 million Palestinians have been displaced by Israel. Over 100 UN workers have been killed, the most in their history in any conflict. Israel announced it would target and eliminate journalists. Hospitals have been warned that they are fair game for attack by Israel. Water, electricity and food have been blockaded. Humanitarian aid has been restricted. Netanyahu himself has invoked religious scripture to justify the killing of Palestinians. He stated, "You must remember what Amalek did to you," says our Holy Bible. The words of politicians mean much. They're very powerful, much more powerful than words uttered by lawyers. Now, whilst Netanyahu tried to ascribe that quote in a narrow way, it's important to understand what else the Bible says about Amalek. Now go and smite Amalek, utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but kill both man and woman, infant, ox, and sheep, camel, and donkey. It's exactly what we're seeing on the ground in Gaza. And I say this, and I make these remarks carefully because politicians' words are listened to, are pored over, are interpreted. And the quote that I've just read, and Netanyahu's quote about Amalek, was criticized in the Jewish News of North Carolina. And I take my quote and my expansion of what he said from there. It's not my own work. The north of Gaza has been forcibly cleared, and Israel has announced it has no intention to return it to the Palestinian control, which is evidence of Israel's intention to ethnically cleanse North Gaza of Palestinians. While we witness this, we have British politicians that are continuing in the political failure that led to the situation becoming the catastrophe that we are witnessing. Many British politicians unequivocally supported Israel's actions against Palestinians in Gaza, failing to understand that they themselves were becoming complicit in war crimes by encouraging them, a matter that's prosecutable in the United Kingdom and in the ICC under the Rome Statute. We cannot allow politicians to be so reckless with their words, and that is why, at the ICJP, we issued notice to senior politicians that we would prosecute them for complicity encouraging war crimes. And we continue to investigate those politicians for that complicity. Some senior politicians appear to be resolved on supporting Israel, no matter what it does when it comes to taking civilian life. Even the Defence Minister, if he is still the Defence Minister of the reshuffle, Grant Shapps, disgracefully invoked the thousands of civilians killed in Dresden in order to excuse the massive number of civilians killed in Gaza by Israel. It is an utter tragedy that the British government appoints a person as Secretary of State for Defence who is so unqualified that he does not even understand that the precise reason we created and developed international humanitarian law after Dresden and after World War II was so that what happened in World War II would not happen again. Shapps' logic is so perverse and so dangerous that it would allow Putin to justify the killing of massive numbers of civilians in Kiev to meet Russia's war aims in the Ukraine. This would clearly not be acceptable. And so why, I might ask, do we find it, or some of our politicians find it acceptable with regards to Palestinians? The ICJP is committed to its Justice for Gaza campaign, which includes collating evidence of war crimes committed by Israel and to work with Scotland Yard to ensure that those responsible for commission, preparation and support of war crimes in Gaza are brought to justice. We at the ICJP are concerned by the number of British citizens that have travelled to Israel to fight with a foreign army in a situation where they may become complicit in war crimes. It has been reported that hundreds of British citizens have joined the IDF. We at the ICJP wrote to the Foreign Office on the 3rd of November to ask for urgent clarification on whether British citizens that travel to the region to participate in the conflict will be liable to prosecution if there is evidence that they have participated in war crimes. As yet, the FCDO appears to be considering its position, literally considering its position, and has not responded to that. But we know that the position must be entirely the same as the very clear guidance that the British government issued to British citizens that intended to fight for the Ukraine against Russia. The FCDO states, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is ongoing with attacks against a number of major cities. There is a real risk to life. If you travel to the Ukraine to fight or to assist others engaged in the war, your activities may amount to offences under UK legislation and you could be prosecuted on your return to the UK. We consider the failure of the SCDO to provide guidance to its citizens about the risk of participating with a foreign army, where it is a clear prima facie case of war crimes, to be a serious dereliction of duty. It's a clear matter of public interest for journalists like yourselves to seek the status of British citizens suspected of committing war crimes directly from the British government. Now, before you have an opportunity to hear from British Palestinians with relatives in Gaza, I'd like to introduce Yasmin Ahmed. Yasmin Ahmed is the UK Director of Human Rights Watch. She has 2 decades of experience as a public international lawyer and a human rights advocate. In her current role, she advocates for the United Kingdom's foreign and domestic policies to be consistent with human rights. Prior to Human Rights Watch, Yasmin was an executive director of the multi-award-winning human rights organisation Rights and Security International. She also worked as a public international lawyer for the UK and Australian governments and at the UN, at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and the Serious Crimes Unit in Timor-Leste. Yasmin Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Taib, and to the ICJP for having me here today. So, first of all, what we are seeing today and what we're witnessing is serious violations of international humanitarian law and war crimes. And what we need to be very clear about is, to this day, we have seen crimes committed by Hamas on October the 7th, crimes that including attacking civilians, taking of hostages, which continue to this day. There needs to be accountability for those crimes, and they are crimes and crimes that need to be called out for what they are. But those crimes, we have been very clear at Human Rights Watch, do not justify crimes being committed. And what we have said very clearly is that Israel has been committing crimes, in particular war crime of collective punishment. They are collectively punishing the entire population of Gaza for the unlawful acts of Hamas. And what are they doing? We know now for 1 month, over a month, they have not allowed in, other than a trickle, any food, water, electricity, fuel, and other humanitarian goods. And we know that that is possible. We know in the context of previous hostilities that humanitarian provision was allowed for, and it is not happening now other than a small trickle. What we are saying now is that after what we have seen this current weekend, we have seen significant attacks on infrastructure, on medical infrastructure, and we are very, very concerned about this. And this echoes the statements made by the Director General of the World Health Organization, who has said, regrettably, the hospital, Al-Shifa, is not functioning as a hospital anymore. This is the biggest hospital in Gaza, is no longer functioning in this current context. He has said that they have been in touch with medical professionals at the hospital who has said now for days, at least 4 days, there has been no electricity and no water. And now we also know that there is no fuel allowed in. And we know the very, very serious ramifications of no fuel being allowed into Al-Shifa. Just this morning and on the weekend, it's reported that because of this and amid Israeli airstrikes, they are going without oxygen, medical supplies and fuel to power incubators and other life-saving medical equipment. The WHO has said unequivocally that the world cannot stand silent while hospitals, which should be safe havens, are transformed into scenes of death, devastation and despair. Israel has accused Hamas of using hospitals as places that they are attacking Israel. If true, This would endanger civilians and violate the laws of war. It would not, however, give the Israeli military free rein to do anything it wanted against hospitals. And it should be clear that there should be evidence of any military use, which as HRW we don't have evidence one way or another. Hospitals have special protections under the laws of war that they only lose when they are used to commit unlawful attacks. What's more, any attacks on them can only come after due warning. Now let's be clear about a few points here. That it is on Israel, it's its liability to be able to prove that attacks have been coming from the hospital. And also, for it to use warnings, they are only lawful and compliant with international law if they can in fact be executed. Right now, what we know as Human Rights Watch is there is no safe way for anyone to get out of Al-Shifa Hospital. There is no way. And in any event, there are people in the hospitals, Al-Shifa and other hospitals, who cannot leave. They cannot leave because of their medical conditions, and there are doctors who are staying there to treat those patients. And nonetheless, we must be very, very clear with Israel that those individuals that stay, the patients and the doctors, remain protected under international law. International law still requires that any attack is discriminate and proportionate. But what we know in the context of Gaza is its healthcare system is absolutely collapsing. 23 out of 35 hospitals in the Gaza Strip are now shut down, amid a context where there are rising, every moment, every minute, there are rising civilian casualties. What Human Rights Watch is calling in this context is that the Israeli authorities should immediately allow fuel into Gaza via the Rafah crossing with Egypt, and should take immediate steps to reopen their commercial crossings in Gaza for humanitarian relief, as they have done in previous hostilities. They cannot deprive Gazans, 2.2 million people, of the fuel needed to power hospital generators and pump water. Willfully impeding the delivery of life-saving relief supplies is a war crime, as is collective punishment. I would like to say that again. Willful impeding the delivery of life-saving supplies is a war crime, as is collective punishment. So what is Human Rights Watch calling on the UK government and on the international community to do immediately? First of all, Israel must allow unimpeded access to humanitarian supplies. As we have said, in previous conflicts, that has been done, and it should be done by the Rafah crossing and Israel's own borders. Yes, Israel has a right to check those supplies, as they have done and continue to have done previously, but they should not stop that. Again, that is a war crime if they are being stopped. They should immediately, the UK government should immediately suspend military and any military equipment and arms that are being supplied to Israel, because of the risk of complicity in grave breaches and war crimes. We know in 2009, in the context of Gaza, the UK publicly stated that our weapons, UK-supplied licensed weapons, were used in that conflict. There is a grave, very real risk that they will be used again in this conflict, and we are saying very clearly military and arms should be immediately suspended. The UK government should take those steps. There should be accountability. We have seen Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC, get up very clearly and speak at the Rafah crossing and speak subsequent to that, and say that there will be ongoing, and there are ongoing investigations in relation to the crimes that are being committed currently. We know that that investigation opened in 2021 and dates back to 2014, but it is ongoing in relation to now. We are calling on the British government to in fact support those investigations in the same way that they have supported the investigations in relation to Ukraine. Accountability is undermined when accountability is not pushed for in all circumstances where there are potentially crimes being committed. And we know there are in this context. And finally, and just picking up on what Taib said, I think it is very important to note that this is sitting against a background of over half a century of a violent occupation. That Human Rights Watch came out in 2021 and said that Israel is committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. The blockade, the 17-year blockade of Gaza, forms part of that crime against humanity of apartheid and persecution. And what we are calling for now is that that must end, and the blockade must end, the siege must end, and that the humanitarian provision must be provided, and that international humanitarian law, as Taib noted, the law that was born out of the Second World War, the law that provides for us as an international community that should be applied regardless of where it is. The international community should be ensuring that international law and the norms of the international community are applied in this context. It is critical, not only for the civilians in Gaza, for the Israeli hostages that are being held by Hamas, but it is critical for the entire international community. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. So we're going to now have an opportunity for you to hear from British Palestinians with family members in Gaza. I think I should say at this point, before that, we've heard lots of voices from family members of Israelis that have been killed or been captured and are kept hostage in Gaza currently. And it's important to also hear voices of British Palestinians and also Palestinians in Gaza. Unfortunately, today I was hoping to present a recording from Professor Ghassan Abu Sitta, who, as we know, is a British citizen, British doctor, who is currently heroically assisting with, as best he can, in Gaza, directly saving lives. He had promised yesterday to provide me with an audio recording, but he hasn't managed to do that. But I think I just wanted to say that despite the fact that he's working with his hands in the most difficult situations from the ground in Gaza, he's still prepared to let the world know what is happening. And it's really important that journalists live up to their responsibility, which is to report the situation in Gaza and project and amplify the Palestinian voice here. So I'd like to now hand over this press conference to family members of Palestinians in Gaza. Would you like to please join me? And what you'll hear is each of the family members present for about 5 minutes their own experience and story that's personal to them. Okay, so I'm going to, because the Palestinian voice should be amplified, I'm going to hand this over to the family members, and there will be a short questions and answer session at the end of this part, and I'll come back to moderate that.
On October 8th, the Israeli army launched a series of airstrike attacks on the city of Gaza. One of the missiles struck without warning my uncle Abdel Nasser Shamallah's house. He and his family were killed instantly. An unimaginable misery in my heart that no matter how hard I try, just won't go away. In this case, these missiles cruelly and suddenly ended the lives of my beloved family. They were all innocent, with hopes and dreams like everybody here. At this time, the missile struck my uncle Abdel Nasser Shamallakh, was at home with his beautiful wife Suha, their sons Ahmed, Marwan, Asad, Muhammad and Yazan, daughter-in-law Ward and her two sons, Abdel Nasser only 2 years and Umar barely 2 months. All of them, one vibrant, bright family wiped out in a matter of seconds. What words can I even use to describe the sorrow and anguish we are all drowning in? What can I even say to try to voice our heartache at this devastating pain? In total, I have tragically lost 30 people of my family, 3 of which just this morning, back home in Gaza, Palestine. 7 of them were children. All their lives, their ideas and aspiration for this world cut brutally short. What did they do? What did baby Omar do? We celebrated Omar's baby shower a few months ago. The only consolation is that he was found in his mother's arm. She cradled him gently until his very last breath. A mother's love, besting all. I remember seeing Gazans and my children playing together when I visited Gaza in the summer of 2022. Such an open soul. He had dreams of seeing the entire world and to visit us here in UK, but his body was never discovered. The bombing of his family home so severe that they were unable to locate his body. According to the civil rescue team, no one was found alive. Just when I thought I might be able to overcome the torment of losing so much of my family, church family, I learned that my cousin had to go through an anguish of seeing her children killed in front of her from the strike of another bomb. They were only 13 and 17, lives put to end before they got to begin. This is not a conflict. This is a clear genocide. We will not be silenced. We will keep fighting and speaking for all of the innocent people who were murdered by the Israeli occupation that has been going for over 75 years. How many more innocent Palestinians need to be killed for the world to come to its senses? The dehumanization and unfair bias against all Palestinian people is no longer acceptable, no longer tolerable. We all know what is really going. We are the eyes of Palestine. We are the voices of the voiceless. We will fight for Palestine, fight for our people, always. We call for a ceasefire. We will not let my family or anyone massacred in Palestine to die in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. It was really a difficult decision for me to make it here. This morning, my in-laws' house has been destroyed by the Israeli airplanes. We have no contact with my in-law family. We don't know how many people have been murdered. We don't know how many people have been injured. It's Al-Ashi family house in Gaza neighborhood. You can imagine not having the opportunity to know who has been killed. We just heard from Wafa. She told us about her family, and they never found her family's bodies, killed bodies, although it's been more than 35 days since this massacre, and it's ongoing. I have tried to speak with many friends, Palestinians from Gaza, British Palestinian from Gaza, to come here. They said, Omar, there's no point coming here. We've been saying for 35 days, our people are being killed by the Western weapons. Our people have been killed using the open blank check by the Western leaders. So the Gazans, they don't want to appear on media, the British Gazans. They feel everyone knows the truth, but no one wants to do anything for the truth. No one wants to do anything. I will tell you about my family in Gaza, and then I will tell you about the killed one. So my brother, his name is Dr. Ahmed Al-Mukhallalati. He's right now inside Al-Shifa hospital. He's a plastic surgeon. He was trained here in St. Thomas's Hospital. He decided to move to Gaza in February this year, just 8 months ago, to start the only and the first plastic and reconstruction surgery department at Al-Shifa hospital. He's been there, he said, for 3 days. Israel is surrounding the hospital. Anyone try to come inside the hospital, Israel shoot them. Anyone try to leave, Israel shoot them. There is no food, no water, no electricity, nothing. And he said the dead bodies inside the hospital has been in the hospital for many days, and this, like, the smell, and no one can put them on the ground. So he said anyone move inside the hospital will be killed. And Ahmed's family are in Gaza City. They left the hospital because the hospital is in siege before Israel entered the hospital 3 days ago. They went to their family house in Gaza neighborhood. And now Israel has bombed the family of their, my brother's in-laws' house. So we don't know anything about them. We try to contact them. We heard from the news there is 2 airstrikes on that house. The house includes British and Irish citizens. We have contacted the British Foreign Ministry. We told them, you are doing double standard. When the war started in Palestine and in the area, you have evacuated the British Israeli citizens by military aeroplanes. However, with the Palestinians, you have done nothing for 35 days. Then you put their names, and they cannot go to the Rafah border. You know what they replied? They said, for the Israelis, their airport, the commercial flight has been cancelled, and this is something new for them. But you, Gazan, you don't have an airport, and you are not used to the commercial airplane to travel to London. So you are less human people, and you deserve to be killed in Gaza, and we will do nothing. This is a crime by the British Foreign Ministry. And by the way, today, David Cameron has been appointed as the British Foreign Minister. Do you know what he said in 2010, 13 years ago? He said, Gaza is an open-air prison. By the way, maybe if the shadow foreign minister said this word today, he will be sacked by Keir Starmer. So 13 years ago, he said Gaza is an open-air prison. Will he say this again today? Will he say the roots of this problem in Palestine did not start this last month? Will he speak about the Israeli blockade of Gaza? This is something unacceptable. As I say, every Palestinian, British Palestinian, Gazan live in London has lost many family members. I have lost 40 family members, 2 families. Entire family has been wiped up. The first one is the judge Fatima Al-Mukhallalati. She was the first female judge in Gaza. She was practicing for more than 40 years. She was sleeping in her house with her husband, the judge. She was 75 years old, and her husband was 77 years old. They were sleeping in the house. Their children were with them, and their grandchildren were with them. I will read the names just because they are not numbers. So Fatima Al-Mukhallalati, her husband, Fahmi al-Najjar, their son, Muhammad Fahmi al-Najjar, their other son, Firas al-Najjar. Muhammad Fahmi al-Najjar have 5 children, Fahmi, Omar, Abdurrahman, Fatima, Yusuf, and his wife, Haneen al-Shawwa. Firas had 4 children, Fatima, Ubaida, Yaman, and Sarah, and his wife, Samaha Kila. Also, I lost my cousin, who's my mother's sister's daughter. Her name is Hiba Salim Ammar. She was killed with her beautiful 3 children, Huda, Kinda, Jamil, with her husband, Jamil Abul Jalil, and his father, his mother, their in-law. Everyone was killed. These people are not just number. And if we now speak about what's happening on the ground in Gaza, the situation is very, very difficult. Israel is targeting the schools, the hospitals, the water tanks, the electricity, everything. They want Gazan people either to be killed or the Gazan people to be just crying to leave Gaza. So they want to occupy this. They have said, we want to use nuclear weapons. They said these are human animals. And yesterday, one of the Israeli leaders said, we want to do the Gaza 2023 Nakba. And no one is talking anything about this. And when you see a Palestinian child raising the Palestinian flag, you see the British Home Secretary saying this is a hate crime. These double standards have to end. I'm here to speak about my family. I'm worried about my family. My family have been killed by British, German, French, American weapons, and they will be accountable. We will go to court. We know the court will not, as the media doesn't represent us, the court will not stand with us. We understand this, but we will never stop talking about Palestine. They are threatening us to defamating us, to making us invisible, to make us sacked from our jobs. We will continue speaking about our people, and the British government have to listen to the people on the streets and have to stop this war. We are calling for this war to be stopped. We want the Gazan people to have the opportunities to live equally as anyone. And we call for the British Foreign Ministry to treat the British Palestinians who are in Gaza equally as it has treated the British Israelis who live in Israel, and not say you are used to live in this horrible situation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Hala Hanina. I came from Gaza to pursue my 3rd year of PhD in sociology and politics, a few days before the beginning of this aggression. In Gaza, I witnessed 7 Israeli aggressions over Gaza since 2008. However, this is the first Israeli aggression over Gaza that I spent outside from Gaza, away from my parents, my siblings, sisters and brothers, my nieces and nephews, my beloved husband and family-in-law. On the 5th of November, Israeli occupation forced a blackout over Gaza. We outside were not able to communicate or call the people we love inside Gaza. But people inside Gaza were not able to communicate with each other internally. And the worst is that they were not able to call ambulances and civil defense if they needed any kind of help or evacuation. And the next morning, Israel allowed some communication back to Gaza. And we received the news that our beloved, dear friend, 28-year-old physician and Bright Evening alumnus, and the leader, Taher Ali, and his whole family were staying in their 6th-floor building in their home when the Israeli occupation targeted them with bombardment 7 p.m. Palestine time on the 5th of November. Only for being Palestinians. Taher was under the rubble with his father, mother, 2 sisters, 3 nephews and nieces for more than 12 hours. We were very sad, however, we had to plead and appeal for help for him to be rescued along with his whole family. But the civil services were not able to reach him because they were so busy collecting and evacuating the massacred Palestinians that the Israeli occupation have been killing and bombarding in the last 12 hours when they did the blackout. Few hours later, late in the morning, the civil defense were able to reach the Mayser's house. However, they were run out of fuel. Each day, his two surviving brothers, the younger brother Muayyad and the married brother Muhammad, kept on going and removing the rubble using their own hands because there was no trucks, because there is no fuel to remove the rubble and the 6th floor rubble from above their parents and rescue them. On the third day, where Muayyad and Muhammad, their cousin, and civil defense and other people were removing the rubble to rescue their family if they were alive, and I was making an interview with the ITV, and the ITV have sent a cameraman to videotape with Muayyad, the younger brother of Maysara. The Israeli occupation army have bombarded the building, Maysara's brothers, again, and killed the only surviving brothers of the family, and the piles of their killed and murdered bodies was over the rubble of their home and their family. The ITV journalist was severely injured along with so many people who were also there at that time. Now Fatima, the only surviving sister, is in Europe, and she's mourning the massacre of 8 at the beginning and then 2 members of her family, all of her family that have been massacred together. Maysar Reyes is a graduate from King College London. He studied women and children health in 2019-2020, along with myself. He has just got married on the 20th of May, a few months ago. I attended their weddings. It was one of the most beautiful weddings. You could see the love shining in their eyes, him and his wife Laura. However, those beautiful lovebirds have been separated brutally by the Israeli occupation because Laura's husband, Maysara, was barbarically murdered and assassinated by the Israeli occupation. And Laura, the young bride, the achieving schooler, has become a young widow. Why? Because Israel needs to kill all the Palestinians to expand further. The day before yesterday, my friend from Mahdi family pleaded with sadness, and I quote him, "The Israeli tanks are blocking my cousin's house and hospital in Gaza City. The bombings are everywhere around them, and we lost contact with them after their hospital was bombed. Location is Mahdi Maternity Hospital," end of quotation. We appealed for help, but no one helped, and the world stood silent as it did for 75 years. However, the only one who responded and listened was the Israeli occupation. And just guess what they did 10 hours later. Again, quotation from my friend. "We've been calling for help to evacuate them as they were deliberately bombed 4 times by tanks today. Our family-run private maternity hospital has been completely bombed now. Multiple members of my family were killed, including my 2 cousins who are obstetric gynecologist consultants, senior consultants, Dr. Basil Mahdi, Dr. Raed Mahdi, with his family, including his beautiful daughter, Dr. Samira Mahdi, who is also a dentist. The hospital housed tens of pregnant women and evacuees who were sheltering in the hospital. And now all of them are either killed or severely wounded under the rubble. The ambulances cannot reach the area as tanks are nearby, and it prevents everyone from reaching there." End of quotation. I at least counted 10 people of his family members and many other children from his family who have been intentionally targeted by the Israeli occupation bombardment over this hospital. And again, the world stood shamefully silent. According to the international law and UK internal law, Israel is illegally occupying power, and Palestinians are under illegal occupation. In the law, the occupier have no right of self-defense. They have only responsibilities over the people who they occupy, to rescue them, to give them the basic rights so they can survive. However, Israel is not just doing that, but they are also committing war crimes against the occupied Palestinians. Moreover, according to the UN Resolution 2625 and 3246 resolutions, Palestinians have legitimate right to resistance and resist the colonial domination, apartheid, and foreign occupation by all available needs, protected by the international law. So why the UK and other countries not adhering to their own laws and calling Israel occupation as they are, and calling Palestinians occupied as they are also? Why don't UK follow its own law and aim to end illegal occupation and recognize Palestine as a state, as they promised since the partition plan in 1947? The UK is responsible for all of the 75 years of our sufferings. Ethnic cleansing. They must adhere to international law and their own law, recognizing Israel as illegal occupation, which doesn't guarantee them any right of self-defense. And then to urge Israel to stop those barbaric crimes and ongoing brutal genocide of my beloved people, which is broadcasted live in front of the whole world. This must end now, and if it's not now, then when? Ceasefire now, end illegal occupation.
Thank you for coming, first of all. Without exaggerations, no house or family in Gaza Strip is free from the casualties of the current wave of attacks, unfortunately. And you're listening now to just a sample of the stories, like in each family of Gaza. The losses extend beyond lives, reaching the destruction of homes, surpassing 70% in residential towers, schools, universities, churches, mosques, and infrastructure. Unfortunately, it's destruction for the sake of destruction, not targeting specific wanted individuals as the IDF claim. They fail to name any targets in each attack to regain lost credibility. For instance, my eldest uncle and his 2 grandchildren lost their lives due to an airstrike targeted the vicinity of their home. They were there innocently, yet the airstrike tore their slender bodies into pieces, forcing their father to carry what remained of their bodies in bags, lacking any means of support to honor the victims even after their death. I wonder, does the pilot possess a heart that truly comprehends that with a push of button, dropping a bomb on residential area will kill children and innocent people, erasing memories built with hard work, dedication, and hopes for dignified, peaceful life, despite all the pain that extends years before October the 7th. It's a military doctrine that doesn't differentiate between the warrior and the innocent, a doctrine devoid of ethics or humanity. In Gaza, people face death multiple times every day in front of the world. Numerous pleas for help reach us daily, every day, and somebody's still lie in hospital courtyards and street as we speak now, with no way to bury them. The world still sees it all as self-defense at the expense of innocent lives that have no one to defend them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity here to be able to speak to you about our experiences as British Palestinians who have family in Gaza. My name is Lubaba Khalid. My mother is Palestinian from Gaza and she's from the Abu Rahma family. They mainly reside in the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza, which is meant to be a safe zone. But we know that there is nowhere safe in Gaza. And to make matters worse, due to the lack of electricity and networks, we have found it very difficult to keep in contact with family members just to check if they're alive. As a result, I found out my great-uncle's house was bombed on the social media platform X before I could get any confirmation from my own family. In that bombing, 6 members of my family were martyred, 5 of whom were children. Children with dreams and ambitions, children who wanted to change the world with their innocence. May Allah accept them all as shuhada, martyrs. However, my mother's cousin is still under the rubble, and as they are still yet to retrieve his body. This is not unique to my family only, but for thousands of Palestinians who are yet to still be found under the rubble. But this is not the only time that I find out about a bombing of a family member's home somewhere else and not directly from family. I was listening to Al Jazeera, getting the hourly updates, to then hear from the reporter saying another residential home belonging to the Abu Rahma family has been bombed in the Nusayrat refugee camp. My heart has dropped. 1,000 things went through my mind. Is it my grandparents' home, where my uncles live, and over 150 other people are residing? We messaged our family group chat. It was radio silent. No messages were being delivered. 2 hours later, my aunt replies, who lives in Khan Yunis, saying she hasn't heard anything and that we are better informed than she is. It took 21 hours for my family in Nusayrat to message and say that it was my other great-uncle's house that was bombed. And thankfully, and I'm grateful, but no one was home that day. And once again, but however, this is again the reality for many of us. We go through days not hearing from family members, having no idea where they are and if they are alive. But I have to have hope. I have to hold on to all my beautiful memories that I have in Gaza. Going to the beach, having the time of my life with my cousins. It is those memories that keep me going, and it is in itself a form of resistance, because it is that they are trying to break. And to our political leaders, you say that the loss of every civilian life is tragic. So prove it. Is it not now time for action and not just words? A ceasefire is the absolute minimum demand. But what we need is accountability, sanctions, and an end to this occupation. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. My name is Ihab, and I work as an engineer in a technology company, so I'm not used to this. So we always talk about Gaza in terms of bombing, destruction, shelling, starvation, mass punishment, collective punishment. So I would like to talk about a different Gaza maybe today, my Gaza. The Gaza of hope, I would say. The Gaza which opened its arms for hundreds of thousands of people who were displaced in 1948, and they call it now home, including my own family. Gaza of hope with its silk beaches, blue waters, with the voices of the kids in the background when they leave school after a long day. The Gaza where people are very generous. The Gaza where people are very resilient. The Gaza where people who managed, against all the odds, to build hospitals, build universities, and create hope for everyone. At a place where we thought as Palestinians, at least part of us, would live in freedom and dignity. Talking about family and friends, and my colleagues talked a lot today. But just imagine this feeling when the first thing you do in the morning and the last thing you do in the morning is to check your mobile to see that message. When you hope that they will pick the phone to say hi, albeit for a second or two. This hi might be literally death or life in Gaza. Or maybe they need to be silent so that the word moves on. Numbers. What are numbers? The 1 became 2, and the 2 became 3, and the 1,000 became 2, and we are around 11,700 people now, and still increasing as we speak, as we talk. I will talk about one of those numbers, Wa'il, my cousin, who was an IT engineer, managed to finish a degree, and even has a dream to develop an app which will teach all the kids around the world Arabic, and he called it Dad. Let's talk about numbers. When we talk about 1.5 million people displaced from their houses, let's talk about the people who left around 40,000 residential units in Gaza. Let's talk about the people who dragged their children in a 10 kilometers escape from the north to the south, dragging the kids on I would say, car seats or pushchairs, pushing the wounded, pushing the elderly, just to escape. I will talk about my uncle who lost his house, civil servant who worked very hard, retired, and believe it or not, he did believe in peace. And he now shares a house with another 50 or 60 people, where, believe it or not, in this time or era, they are actually baking using wood and clay ovens, because simply there's no fuel or cooking gas, while Gaza actually is on top of millions and trillions of cubic meters of gas. A curse to the Gazans appears eventually. Numbers, what are numbers? I will talk about my aunties and my uncle who decided not to leave and to stay put in the north, because simply they don't have an option. Because they said, could we stay within our memories and live and accept the degree in dignity? Those a lot who actually accepted the displacement, you know what they did? Why they did it? They did it only to protect the kids, only to protect the future. Because believe it or not, the Gaza of Hope also always thinks about the future. Going back to Wa'il, my cousin, was actually killed queuing for bread 2 weeks ago. His brother, Bashar, is critically wounded. His elderly parents are devastated. And I think we all agree that parents should not bury the kids. My Gaza's hope is calling all of us. To be honest, when I was in London on Friday in the march, I found this on the floor. And I didn't accept that Ahmed will be not honored by talk about him today. He was 16 years old. He was killed in a strike. To be honest, I don't know him. And he deserved to be honored in this and always. Gaza of Hope, my Gaza, is calling whatever is remaining of humanity in this world to stop this madness. This madness will not bring peace to the Middle East. It will only bring years and years of violence, escalation, not only for the Middle East and potentially for the world. And I think we all have the responsibility to call for peace. And the only way to obtain peace in the Middle East is justice for the Palestinians. Thank you. Sorry, you have to bear with me another 2-3 minutes. This is a letter addressed to the Mr. Prime Minister in the names of the families here. And it will be issued by the ACGB. Thank you for your support with that. As you are keenly aware, Mr. Prime Minister, our community is in a state of deep shock and mourning after the terrible events since the 7th of October. All of us are grieving for our lost family members and friends who are victims of the ongoing Israeli operation in Gaza. Our loved ones are still in grave danger under the indiscriminate bombardment and the dire humanitarian situation, with no access to water, electricity or food, and communication channels also restricted and cut. According to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, the World Health Organization, WHO, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA, and other humanitarian agencies working in Gaza, the Israeli army has dropped thousands of bombs on Gaza. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on the planet. It's home to 2.1 million Palestinians, approximately half of whom are children. The majority of those in Gaza were already refugees from villages and towns now situated within Israel. From the 7th of October to the 10th of November, 11,078 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, including 4,506 children, and more than 27,490 injured, thousands critically. According to the figures reported by OSHA, women and children make up 68% of those killed. Some 1.5 million people in Gaza have been displaced, with nearly 760,000 sheltering in at least 149 UNRWA facilities. The worsening sanitary conditions, along with the lack of privacy and space, generate health and safety hazards. These sites are so overcrowded that many people are sleeping on the streets. Clean drinking water is scarce, and the risk of fatal dehydration and the outbreak of waterborne diseases, including cholera, are acute, with a restricted amount of aid permitted to Gaza. According to Oxfam, the Red Cross, and Amnesty International, humanitarian law is not being upheld by Israel, as clearly violating the principles of distinction, the principle of precaution, and the principle of proportionality. These violations put our loved ones in Gaza under severe danger, and it has resulted in us losing family members. Israel has indiscriminately destroyed Gazan residential buildings, universities, hospitals, and civilian infrastructure. This cannot be justified, and it constitutes collective punishment. We have no evidence that these structures are used as militant bases, especially when Israel Defense Forces warn residents to evacuate beforehand. We have been actively engaging in all possible democratic tools to ask the UK government to call for an immediate ceasefire, which has been repeatedly refused. Instead, the government has called for humanitarian pauses, which are inadequate in protecting our family and loved ones in Gaza. We believe the UK government's position is putting our loved ones in danger and is contributing to an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. It also ignores our voices as British citizens with friends and family under attack in Gaza. We call upon the UK government to urgently exert its influence to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and to ensure the urgent and adequate provision of food, fuel, medicine, and other humanitarian assistance to Gaza. We also call for the unconditional restoration of water and electricity, the protection of medical facilities, the facilitation of safe passage of the critically ill and those requiring treatment abroad, including in the UK, and allowing our families in Gaza to immediately apply for the UK resettlement scheme. As British Palestinians with families in Gaza, we request an urgent meeting with you to express our concerns, similar to the meetings you have had with other British communities who have families in the region who have experienced the distress similar to ours as a result of the conflict between the Israeli government and Hamas. Thank you.
I'd just like to start by thanking our guests. And I heard there was some strained applause from the audience, and I can understand that because the messages sent by these families that came to speak to you are really powerful. And there is a way that you want to demonstrate your appreciation for it, but clearly after what you've heard, clapping is not appropriate. It doesn't feel appropriate. But I think I should say to all of you, thank you very much for coming today. And your bravery in coming to this platform in light of what's happened to you this morning, yesterday, and over the last few weeks is phenomenal. And I consider you all to be heroes. And it's the reason that ICJP does this work is for you. And we'll continue in our efforts to support you as best we can. What we've heard from our guests today, we're going to questions and answers shortly. And I'll ask you to moderate your questions. There will be some questions that I will not allow if I consider them to be inappropriate. And there are some questions that I will answer on behalf of our guests if I consider them to be not quite right at this moment in time. Our guests will also do interviews if they feel they want to do that at the end individually. But that's a matter for them. But what we've heard stories of human beings, really, haven't we? We've heard lots of accounts of what happened to the 1,200 people that were killed on October the 7th. We've shared in that loss, but we haven't really heard about the Palestinian community in Britain or in Gaza. Those stories are silenced, and that's a mark of what's been happening in Palestine for 75 years. The Palestinian voice remains silent. Even I, as director of ICJP, I'm embarrassed that I'm not a Palestinian that is making this speech, and it takes somebody who was born in Yorkshire and a lawyer here to be able to speak on behalf of Palestinians. Because why? Because Palestinians, when they speak in this country, are subjugated, are attacked, are called anti-Semitic. They lose their jobs because they stand for ceasefire. This is real. We've seen it on social media over the last few weeks. And so for that reason alone, I think it's brave for these people to come here. And I can guarantee you there will be research being done into my guest's background, not to look at the human story, but to see if there's a link to some nefarious actor or person or individual in Gaza, because that's what they have to deal with. From the British mainstream press, from British politicians, that will be the first action for many commentators in the UK. I've experienced it myself as director of ICJP, as a lawyer in one of the world's, if not Britain's, most famous law firms, Bindman's Partners, Bindman's LLP. And I have to defend myself. I have to provide evidence for every statement I make. I have to labour over that. That same standard is not given to Israeli commentators or Netanyahu or people that support the illegal acts that are happening in Gaza right now. And what we've heard from our guests, the human story, it's very clear to us, as Yasmin indicated and advocated, that what Israel is engaged in is war crimes. It's not a difficult equation. It's not a difficult thing to see. And British politicians that support that are also complicit. The British state that provides armaments for Israel to carry out these war crimes is complicit. And this perpetual impunity that's gifted to Israel is really a curse. It's a curse for Israel, because what we will continually see is the cycle of violence and no real will for a political solution, which is the only answer in that region. A military solution is not an answer. All it does is cause death and destruction and hatred, and it perpetuates that. And if our politicians can't see that and categorize millions of people across the world that try to prevent that as hate marchers, then the system of democracy, our rule of law, our principles are already lost. And that's the worst thing that can happen if we want peace and security, which is what everybody wants, going forward for our children, for ourselves, for our colleagues, even for our enemies. Okay, I'm going to open the floor for some questions now, so just please raise your hand, and there's probably a roving microphone somewhere as well. Let's just, to you, please. Thank you. Sorry, when you ask a question, like I said, please bear in mind that our guests have gone through quite a traumatic time, and could you direct the person that you want to ask the question to? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Ashita Nagesh. I'm from BBC News. I'm so deeply sorry for all of your loss, and thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. My question, it might be more appropriate for you, Ms. Ali, to answer, but I wanted to know what's been your opinion and your experience of the handling of the evacuation operation by the FCDO, and also of the government's support for, in your opinion, maybe lack of support for Palestinians with family in Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, that question's a good question, and it's sort of indicative of the double standard and two-faced approach. And it's a two-faced approach. If on one hand I'm asking a state that is committing war crimes, and I'm supplying them with weapons to do that, to adhere to international humanitarian law, but I'm not actually withdrawing those weapons because I see what's happening on the ground, that's a double standard I'm applying to that situation. On the one hand, I'm saying, oh, please don't hurt anybody, here's a weapon to do it, right? And I think that's the same characterization of the entire approach of the British government. You've heard from our guests that their family members were left alone. Professor Ghassan Abu Sitta contacted me because the Foreign Office will not speak to him. He's tried to contact them. They will not speak to him. So I'm having to do that from London on his behalf because they will not speak to him. There is a different standard applied by the British government to people in Israel, to people in Gaza. There is a pretense that they are potentially trying to help people in Gaza when they're not. There is a mechanism to open a humanitarian channel, but we've got to also look at that. The reason why people call for a ceasefire as opposed to a humanitarian pause is because a humanitarian pause is part of a strategy to move Palestinians out of Gaza, to cleanse that region of Palestinians. A ceasefire will allow people to stay where they are, to habit the land that they live and belongs to them, and to receive aid. And there's a significant difference between that. I do not support a humanitarian pause, which is really a mechanism to force people out of that region. So you bomb them and you say you leave this region and you can live, you stay here and you die. It doesn't matter if you're a civilian or not. That's not lawful. And that's what our government appears to be supporting. And so in answer to your question, I think I've answered it, but to just to narrow that point, I don't think that the British government is dealing with Palestinians in the same way as it would deal with Israelis that are victims of criminal acts. And I think, it's indicative of the British government's position that the families here have to write a letter to the Prime Minister, please can we speak to you? It's almost like they're invisible, right? I think the British government owed a duty to British Palestinians who have family members in Gaza to reach out to them and speak to them and understand their position instead of ignoring them and labelling them and the people that support them as hate marchers.
Can I reply about that?
Sure.
So my family members are British Palestinians, and I have been contacted the British Palestinians in Gaza. They are in 3 groups. The first group, which is like my brother, his name and his family names has been on the list to travel. But they are in North Gaza, they cannot travel. I spoke with the British Foreign Minister, I told them, they are in Gaza City and they cannot move because Israel is shooting anyone. They said, we have no presence in Gaza and we cannot help you anyway. I told them, my brother's wife is pregnant, she cannot walk for 4 hours. They said, we can do nothing. We tried to speak with the International Red Cross, they said Israel did not protect the safety of our staff, so we stopped our operation in Gaza. The United Nations, all the human rights, all the international bodies have stopped. For the ones who left Gaza already, so what the British government have provided them, so if there are 8 family members, they give them 2 rooms for 2 bed two double beds, which is only for 4 people, and the atmosphere in Egypt. So they put them in Egypt, and they told them, you have to travel. They told the British Foreign Ministry that all our monies are in Gaza. Israel did not allow us to leave anyway, except just like, walk here. They said we can not provide you with any even loans or anything. So the third thing is about the atmosphere in Egypt. Egypt has received millions of refugees in the Sudan crisis, in many crises. Now the Egyptian people are fearing that there is 2 million Palestinian refugees are coming. So even the Palestinians who are going via the British embassy, they are not supported. The last thing, which is the horrible thing, if you are a British citizen and your wife or husband is not a British citizen, the British government is not helping you. If you are a British child and your parents are not British, the British government is not helping you anyway. And this is important why I'm saying this, because in different cases like Ukraine, the British government were allowing anyone to come on the aeroplane. So they give orders to the aeroplanes. Any Ukrainian come to any aeroplane, can go to any European or British country without any visa. The ones who are not Ukrainians, they were getting on the Polish airports or train station temporary travel documents. So we are seeing the double standard, and it's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please go ahead.
As Mr. Lapa from the Middle East Monitor, I just want to say thank you first of all to ICJP and commend you for the powerful testimony you guys have given. On that, I was wondering if you have thought about having an organisation, Survivors of Gaza Genocide. I think it was such a powerful group for media like ourselves to speak to, get your testimony out there with sympathetic news agencies, not some of the mainstream ones which are quite hostile and horrible from what I've seen. So for the sympathetic news agencies to approach you and get your testimonies out there. And we know life after Gaza will not be the same in so many ways. Here in the UK, we are like to see more draconian laws being introduced, and in efforts to strip Palestinians of citizenship, and also organizations that support the Palestinian cause being labeled as terrorists. So these laws that are already being contemplated and could be introduced in the coming months and years. So I was wondering, if you can speak on whether you have seen an increase in number of Palestinians facing the prospect of having their citizenship stripped. And we've seen reports of that on social media. Have you seen that, and is your organisation, is the ICJP, working with Palestinians like that?
I'll keep the answer brief for this. There has been an increased instance of what I could describe as attempts to silence the Palestinian voice. And I would include that with regards to with the Home Office sending letters, for example, to people with Palestinian heritage who are on visas, where the Home Office has indicated that because of public statements they've made, they feel they're not conducive to the public good in the UK now, and have indicated that they're thinking about or intend to revoke their visas, for example. So that's already happened. That happened quite early on. With regards to citizenship stripping, I haven't seen that happen yet, but within what I've seen in social media, there is clearly a concerted effort to try to marginalise and silence the Palestinian voice, which is the main reason why we decided to hold this event today, to amplify the Palestinian voice. Gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah. I'm also a British Palestinian. I was supposed to be on the stage today, but due to some circumstances, I don't think I'm emotionally able to stand there. As appeared in news yesterday for my family, they were under severe bombardment by Israel. They targeted an area in Gaza, and my family left last minute in the middle of night under the artillery shelling. Snipers, and they kept running and they bombed our home. It's been completely destroyed, about 88-story building. It's just been completely bombed just within seconds, and my family made it last minute. So I just feel for the safety, I can just stand in there and share my views. I also lost family members, my wife, my brother-in-law, his 3 children, also being murdered. Israel bombed their houses when they were sleeping. And ironically, the Israeli Defense Forces said on Twitter they targeted Hamas members and they were children. This is one of the lies. Everything Israel bombs is always Hamas base. At the end of time, when you look into it, you just find it mosques, churches, buildings, homes, civilians, people just living safely in their homes. I just want to make a comment on the humanitarian post. I was in touch with my MP a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that, and he was happy about mentioning that. The moment he just mentioned it, it's like, sorry, look, there could be somehow something about humanitarian post, people now discussing it. And I told him, look, you know what came up to my mind when I hit the humanitarian post? That instead of killing my family now, we're going to kill them after a week. This is exactly what humanitarian post is. Why would you just delay the killing of our families? Humanitarian pause is nonsense, and now actually we're just seeing it, because my family has to flee to the south when they bombed our home. Kids, about 25 people were in our flat, and they had to run in the middle of the night under heavy bombardment, all the entire neighborhood, and they barely made it to the south. And they made it to the south through the what's called the 3 or 4 hours hose Israel did, so they allow a corridor of people. So they stopped killing you for 4 hours to allow me to go. And on the way, I was speaking to my dad in the morning, and he told me he's seen hundreds of bodies, decomposed bodies, on the road, children, women, men, and no one is able to save them. No one is able to look into them. You need to walk, you need to hold your ID card up high, with a white flag, absolute humiliation, and you can see the soldiers firing in the air, terrifying entire children in front of the very eyes of the so-called civilized world. I, myself, I don't believe in all of this. I'm really sorry to say that. I've lost faith in every single human, in every single government. The double standards we're currently witnessing, the dehumanization of our people, of innocent civilians, of people, of human beings, are second to none. It's absolutely disgusting. Seeing human people, bodies, children, women. My mom was absolutely traumatized. When I was speaking to her, she was barely made one single word from what she said, what she was saying. She couldn't even explain that to my little brother, and even to the children that were with him. It was absolutely horrific. See, my dad is a professor, my mom's a professor. Their entire life was dedicated to humanity. Why they should die? For what sake? For whose sake? And why Israel is still continuing to kill, to murder, under what pretext they do? A country that is based and built on lie, their rhetoric is a big lie, their discourse is a lie, and every single person believing in this lie. And when the Palestinians come out since 75 years shouting, crying, we are dying, trying to convince the world that we're dying, we still need to submit evidence. So next time when my family die, I'm going to take a picture of my dad and send it to the Prime Minister and to this government and tell them, okay, this is an evidence that you killed my parents. This is absolute nonsense. I don't know where we are heading. And then what? What was going to happen? What is the end? How many Palestinian people should die?
My friend,
how many thousands?
My friend, I don't mean to cut you off unnecessarily, but we have very limited time left. So no, it was a very powerful contribution. Thank you for that. Any other questions from members of the press at the back there? Thank you.
Sohaib Jabal from Al-Arab in UK. My question is, what is the next step of the ICJP for helping the bereaved families and the Palestinian families? And also, you sir said for a while about the evidence, and as my colleague said for a while also, it's very clear the evidence is a lot of evidence, and it's very clear. So what's the next step also in bringing the perpetrators to the justice? Thank you.
There is a difference between evidence and knowledge, frankly. And so we know what's happening, we can see what's happening, and we can advocate about that, as Yasmin has done, and say this is what's happening on the ground. In order for action and accountability to occur, unfortunately, it's painstaking, it's time-consuming, and it's resource-heavy. So what we are doing at ICJP is we have an investigation department where we are investigating suspects in the Israeli government, commentators in Israel, British politicians and politicians around the globe that have contributed to the war crimes in Israel, Gaza. And we are collating painstakingly that evidence to a criminal standard, a British criminal standard. What we intend to do with that file, some files are almost ready now. We intend to provide that evidence to Scotland Yard, who we think has demonstrated over the last few days is an independent actor in regards to this conflict, in terms of not bowing to government pressure to ban a massive peace march. I do have faith in the police in the UK. I know lots of police officers on a professional basis. They will, I hope, investigate the evidence that we provide to them. I hope they will take steps to meet the United Kingdom's obligations under their own statute, of which we are a signatory and we have enshrined in domestic law, as we have done with the Geneva Conventions. I hope that politicians that supported the war and politicians that are executing the war as they're doing in Israel will be investigated when they arrive in the UK, will be arrested and prosecuted. Failing the police taking this action, there is a possibility for the ICJP to apply for private arrest warrants, as lawyers in the ICJP did before its creation in 2009 against Zippy Livni in Operation Castlet. There is also the ability to give the information to the International Criminal Court, and hope that Karim Khan lives up to his huge responsibility of investigating and prosecuting these crimes as speedily as he did with regard to suspects in the Ukraine and supporting that action. But there's also the rest of the world, and we shouldn't forget that. ICJP will be providing evidence packets to every single law enforcement agency across the world, because at least one of them, I am certain, will take action against war criminals and war criminal suspects in Israel. The intention of ICJP is to send a very clear message to politicians that are complicit in war crimes, that your tenure as a politician is not all that means. Once you stop being a minister, once you stop being a prime minister, a foreign secretary, you carry the burden of that crime with you. You carry it to your next job, whether it's in private industry, whether it's as a hedge fund manager somewhere, whether it's traveling around the world because you've already got enough money. You carry that criminal act with you. And ICJP are committed to pursue those individuals across the world for the rest of time. We won't stop. We won't stop. We've seen the same thing happen with actors that were involved in the Holocaust being prosecuted in their 90s. Exactly how it should be done. There's no issue with that. The rule of law doesn't wait and won't wait. We will ensure that these politicians will carry this burden with them wherever they go. And if we can persuade law enforcement agencies in any country to do their job, we will provide the evidence to them to do that. I think that's enough questions, so I think we've run out of time. I'd just like to say thank you very much to our guests for coming today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very brave, and thank you very much. There will be copies of the letter that the families want to send. If you want a copy, please ask a member of my team and we'll make one available to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thank you.
I think when the
Thank you so much.
Obviously, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.